My name is Lori Mikva. I'm a member of the LSC board, and it's really my honor to introduce our next panel. In keeping with the theme of looking beyond, we're going to look beyond public interest lawyers. Legal aid lawyers alone cannot close the justice gap. For example, hundreds of leaders from business, academia, and local governments sign letters to Congress each year in support of federal funding for for civil legal services. It was referenced earlier. These letters are really essential to maintaining LSC funding. This past year, almost 150 corporate counsel signed such a letter, including 8 companies from Minnesota: Allianz, US Bank Corp, Medtronic, Best Buy, Mayo Clinic, 3M, CHS Inc., and Carlink. Our partners in the business community are some of the best, most influential and effective actors in expanding access to justice, including the 3 on stage with me today. So I'd like to introduce them. Jim Chosey, Senior Executive Vice President and General Counsel of US Bank Corp., parent company of US Bank. Among his extensive board and community activities, he serves on the boards of the Equal Justice Works and Minnesota Legal Aid. He's chair of the Corporate Advisory Council for the National Legal Aid and Defender Association. Ivan Fong, former chairman and that's a...
Switch jobs.
Congratulations.
I got you here. Ivan is Executive Vice President, General Counsel, and Secretary of Medtronic. He's also a member of the LSC's Leader Council. He's held roles in the Justice Department, the Department of Homeland Security, has served as General Counsel at 3 public companies, former chair of the board of the Equal Justice Works. On a more personal note, he started out his legal career as a law clerk to my father, Judge Abner Mikva, on the DC Court of Appeals, before he went on to clerk for Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. Now, what do we do with the... Sorry, guys. This was a foolproof system. Except when I lose a card.
I can cover it.
Okay.
My name is Tim Flynn. I'm delighted to be here today. I'm retired chairman and CEO of KPMG. I serve on a number of corporate boards since I retired in 2012. Born in Minneapolis, went to St. Thomas, and delighted to be here with all of you today.
He's done really so many great things. I had a really long card on him. My word, he served on many, many boards. So I first want to ask all of you to share a defining moment with us. You're all here at an LSC event about increasing access to justice. This is obviously important to you. Can you tell us how and why this value took root in your lives? I'll start with you, Jim.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure I have one singular defining moment or origin story, no lightning strike of enlightenment, but let me just share a couple things. The first of which is I love and have always loved American history, government, politics, current events, things like that. Studied political science as an undergrad, and I've just always been interested in the rule of law as one of the founding principles of our country and been inspired by this ideal of equal justice under law. A big influence on me and my values is actually a place, which is my hometown of Madison, Wisconsin, a very progressive city, university town, state capital, a place that instilled civic pride and a strong sense of service and stewardship. Then I became a lawyer, and I've just always felt very privileged to be a member of the legal profession and am proud of my title as a lawyer, and I try to take that role very seriously. I believe strongly the law is indeed a profession. It's not a trade, it's not a business, but it's a profession. There's a terrific definition of a profession that goes back over 100 years. Justice Brandeis came up with it, and he described one of the distinguishing characteristics of a profession as an occupation that's pursued largely for the benefit of others and not merely for one's self. So it's a higher calling and it comes with great responsibility. And I think that we lawyers, as legal professionals, have a responsibility to this system and to those that it should be serving, and a responsibility to access and to equal justice. And unfortunately, today, as we all know, the system's just not working as well as it should be. It's not working fairly and equally for everyone. And we do not have equal justice under law as yet, though we aspire to it. And there are any number of statistics. I've heard several of them cited today, including the LSC's own Justice Gap report, showing that 92% of Americans don't have adequate assistance in their substantial legal problems. And that statistic I just can't get over every time I hear it, 92%. Similarly, the World Justice Project recently ranked the US only 115th out of 142 countries in access and affordability of civil justice. And then right here at home, Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid, an organization I'm passionate about, involved with, they turn away over half of their potential clients for lack of resources. So for me, these kinds of statistics are just unacceptable, really, and I think they should be a source of some shame, actually, for the legal profession. And without equal justice, to me, it's not just the system, but it's the government itself that can't function properly. And this corollary was actually noted by our own Senator Walter Mondale. Senator Klobuchar noted this, that he was involved in sponsoring the original legislation for the LSC way back in 1971. And he said, with his typical plain eloquence, if the poor and the powerless do not have free access to our legal system, then government by law itself is a failure. So I think I will pause there, but those are just some thoughts as I think about the value of equal justice.
Thank you. Ivan.
Well, thank you, Lori, and thank you to the Legal Services Corporation for inviting us to this panel. It's such an important topic for us to be talking about, and such great friends in the audience, John Levy and Ron Flack and Jesse Nicholson. I too don't have a defining moment. I do think back to when I was a child, when I was raised. My parents came to the United States as immigrants, as refugees, and so I grew up knowing that there is no guarantee, and this country has been so good to my family that it only behooves me to want to give back. I grew up in the 60s and 70s when the heroes in my family were Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. And so phrases like life's most urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And Marian Wright Edelman's quote, service is the rent we pay for being. It is the very purpose of life, not something you do in your spare time. So that's how I was raised. And Lori, I appreciate your allusion to my clerkship with Judge Abner Mikva, from whom I learned a great verse in Scripture, Micah 6:8, do justice is one of the 3 commands. So it's just something I was born with and into throughout school, whether law school or college. I did volunteer works, community service work. As a lawyer in a law firm, I did a ton of pro bono work. I did death penalty cases. I did child custody, adoption cases. I did work for nonprofits. I became the vice chair of the firm's pro bono committee. Then in the government, I continued to advocate for government lawyers doing pro bono services. I'm particularly proud that I have this little certificate from Attorney General Janet Reno. I worked on the pro bono policy that allowed Department of Justice lawyers to do pro bono work, and so that was a nice recognition. And then we'll talk more, but in-house, I've become an advocate for in-house lawyers doing pro bono work, and so have done a fair amount of work here in town, in Minnesota, but also really want to support and encourage other lawyers. As Jim said, it really is a professional responsibility. Practicing law is a privilege. We have a license from the state, and in exchange for this monopoly, we have an obligation to provide services to those who cannot afford them. And I really tell folks, not only is the need great, we all know the statistics, the 92%, but it's rewarding. For me, the defining moments are those cases that I worked on where you're serving a client and the client is just so grateful to have a lawyer help them with their particular legal problem and crisis. And I think back, those were the moments that I said to myself, this is why I became a lawyer, right? To have those moments when you have a really grateful client and get to work on something interesting and fun, learn new skills. It's great bonding because I work with paralegals and others in the law firm and in the legal department that I otherwise might not have that opportunity. So I too will pause. I could go on at great length.
Thank you, Ivan. Would you share that memo with the state attorney generals around the country?
Of course.
Tim, I did find it. Tell us about your moment or moments.
Well, first of all, it's really great to be here. And John, who's known a long time, and my friend Paul Snyder has been very much involved with this organization for a very long time, invited me to be here today. I would say my aha moment with this is being on this panel and preparing for it. I have had the privilege of leading a large international accounting firm, sitting on some very prestigious corporate boards. And this topic, in all the social responsibility, all the activities that we do such great jobs in our community around, and these organizations do fantastic work. This is a topic that hasn't risen to the top of kind of the ideas, the energy, etc. I did a bit of research to see how my corporate boards looked at this, and I found one Walmart Corporation has invested $100 million over the next 5 years on social justice and had 4 key areas. It was education, finance, health, and criminal justice. And I was delighted to see that, but I hadn't heard much about that. So I'm going to go back and do some investigation on that and understand it better. I've had the resources, my family has, to solve issues and take care of things, and we haven't personally experienced some of the things we've heard about today. And some of the statistics and the numbers are really amazing and enlightening. And as I prepared for this over the last couple of weeks, I talked to a number of people about the question you asked me. And have you ever experienced that in your life? And these are friends that I've socialized with and have known. And there was a woman who's a lawyer. We're out for dinner, my wife and I and Susan, her husband. And I said, I'm on this panel, and I'm just curious, do you have any ideas that I could say in this question? Because I haven't had personal experience. She kind of looked at me, and she said, well, I knew a woman who was in an abusive relationship. She had 2 children, didn't have any financial resources. She kept going down to the courthouse and to the city hall to file applications for restraining orders and try and work through the process of divorce, all those things, and looked around, and there were all kinds of other mothers, just like me. I was one of those moms. And she talked about that experience in her life through that, and now she practices law and giving back in that process. So those are a couple of aha moments that I know much more about what you all have done and appreciated for it and how it's impacted people's lives that I know personally.
Well, I think you sell yourself short, but okay. Jim, I want to talk to you about the letter I referenced moments ago. As chair of the Corporate Advisory Council, you were the chief organizer of the signature gathering effort. Tell us why it's important for business leaders to voice support for legal aid, and what did you say to your fellow business executives to get them to sign on?
Yeah, thank you. So it's interesting. It's not always intuitive to people why businesses, and particularly large corporations like mine, should be involved with civil legal aid and support it. Just as one example, we at US Bank have a very long and deep and strong relationship with Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid right here in the Twin Cities, and people often ask me that, how did that come to be? And for me, the answer is pretty simple. Actually, it's about community. If you think about it, the business community is part of the fabric of the broader community, and businesses cannot thrive. They can't do what it is that they want to do unless the community is thriving. And I think this is especially true. Banks are a good example of this. It's especially true of the business of banking. Banks have traditionally been cornerstones of their communities. They serve and they try to strengthen their communities where they're located, where their customers and their employees live and work. And to think back over the course of history, banks typically were located in the center of town, and they often had a special room, and it was called the community room. And that was a place for the community to gather and to talk about matters of common interest and to make big decisions. Those days are gone now, of course, with banking done very differently. But I think that spirit really remains, that spirit of community. So a cornerstone of a strong community is just a high-functioning system of justice and a system that works fairly and works equally and that people trust and have faith in, and one that protects the rights of its most vulnerable. So again, to take the example of Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid, it's been protecting rights and improving lives for over 100 years. But to me, really what it's been doing is building community. Yes, it does legal work, but it's really about building community and working further to equal justice. So I would make the case that supporting legal aid, which strengthens the system and promotes equal justice, is really a business imperative. Any business that's concerned with the health of its community, and every business should be, needs to be concerned about equal justice and needs to understand the critical role that civil legal aid plays in promoting that. So that's kind of how I think about the business case. In terms of my role and my peers' role in supporting legal aid, there are a number of things that we can do and do, and Ivan articulated several of them, but one of them is this great example of the letter that is done annually. This is, I believe it was originated with NLADA, and one of its lead authors, just to give full credit, is a guy named John Schultz, who's the general counsel of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. But it's a terrific letter. It makes the case for legal aid, and we send it annually. This year we had over 150 different signatories, including myself and Ivan, just talking about the importance of legal aid and why businesses care about it, echoing some of the themes that I just described. And the feedback that we get on the letter is just terrific, to know that it matters and makes a difference. And when a congressional representative, for example, gets a letter signed by several large brand name companies from their district, they pay attention. So it really has an influence and does matter. And the case that's set out in the letter, and I commend it to your reading, is very eloquent. I did not write the letter, full credit to John, but it's just very well done. So anyway, I'll stop there, but thank you for the question.
Thank you. Thank you for the letter. And your discussion of community is a really good segue to the question I have for you, Tim. I want you to talk about how corporate leaders set their community impact activities. KPMG, where you were CEO for many years, made a major commitment to helping underrepresented groups confront systemic barriers to education, healthcare, and economic opportunities. And this is just a great thing. Tell us what that looks like in practice, and how is it determined that that would be a community impact priority?
Well, first, I agree totally with Jim that this is really important that we give back to the communities. Any business needs to have strong, healthy communities for their customers, for their employees, for all their stakeholders. And so I think to me, it starts with a business imperative to have that environment around you. And then how do you figure out what you do? So first of all, it has to be aligned, in my view, to the mission, the values, the vision, and the strategy of the organization. Because if it doesn't align to those, it won't be sustainable. And then it has to be sustainable for a long period of time. It can't be reactive to different issues of the day. And I think in modern times, some companies have reacted to different issues of the day, and they've lost the long-term vision what they're trying to accomplish in jumping from item to item versus a sustained, supporting, long-term view. Look at U.S. Bank and how long they've been involved in legal aid, et cetera. So that's the next part. And then third, you have to have clear, defined goals. What are you trying to accomplish? What impact are you trying to have? And then you have to have metrics to measure those goals and see how you're doing toward that success. Because you can't just have the ideas and the ambition, you have to have results as part of it as well. So you have to have those measurable goals, the metrics to drive it. And then you have to engage all stakeholders. And you have to engage them and inspire them to be part of it. And I think those are the key things as I look at what has made programs successful over time. Jim talked about the community bank going back a long time. History kind of repeats itself over time as well. JP Morgan is bringing back what they call community branches. There's 16 of them across the country in inner cities where people don't have access to finance education, might have access to legal aid, access to fair housing and how you finance. And within that community, having that branch bank there, they engage with the community leaders, they do education, they bring people in. It's a gathering point. And those 16 branches have really made a difference in the communities that they're in. It aligns to the mission of the bank, but also the health of the community they're trying to drive as well. You know, the healthcare group where I'm on the board in the healthcare space, you know, it was very interesting. One day we were talking about healthcare and delivery and providers. And there was a person of diversity in the room and said, I've never had a doctor that looks like me in all my years of healthcare. You know, the healthcare group is investing $100 million to 2030 to change the diversity of care providers, lining up in partnerships with institutions, medical schools, et cetera, to make that happen. So again, important for them, but important for those constituents in the community as well. And at KPMG, just real quickly on that, I was there 32 years. I was in the leadership for 7, 8 years. I don't think much that I put in place is still there, but my lovely wife wanted to create a nonprofit organization to engage the spouses and partners of the partners. So flip it around a little bit, you know, instead of just thinking about the partners and the employees, how do we engage their broader families involved in something? And she created a program with another partner of hers called KPMG Family for Literacy. It's still running today. They've given over 7 million books out to underprivileged children. There's been 60,000 volunteers with KPMG involved in it, 161,000 people impacted. And much like the stats we talked about today, if children aren't literate, if they can't read, their chances of being incarcerated, their chances of not having a successful life go up exponentially. But if they can read and understand, it can change their lives. And through that program and that community, it really engaged the families of the organization, and they have more pride about being part of KPMG through the people who worked at KPMG. And I can go on other examples of what corporations have done, but to me, what you're doing in this vertical slice of very important things is wonderful, and we need to engage more people horizontally with you in that process.
Congratulations, Joy. That's amazing. Thank you for that answer. Ivan, you served in so many roles in your career on public, private, government sectors. The last several years, you've led in-house departments at 2 major Minnesota brands, 3M and now Medtronic. 3M, under your leadership, was named Best Legal Department of the Year by the American Lawyer, in part based on the pro bono culture there. How do you nurture in-house commitment to pro bono, and what do you do to try and ensure that the members of your team continue their commitment to pro bono beyond your tenure at the company?
So I would start with the points that Tim and Jim have made, a bit of 3 legs of the stool. First, make it part of the mission. So Medtronic also is celebrating a milestone anniversary, 75 years. LSC is 50 years. And core to Medtronic is its mission, which was written back in 1960, and it includes the phrases, our purpose is to alleviate pain, restore health, and extend life. And there are 6 tenets in the mission, and ask any Medtronic employee, they can usually recite the phrase that I just mentioned. And my favorite tenet is tenet 6, which says, maintain good citizenship as a company. So that is an important part of Medtronic's culture, is to ensure that the company is a good corporate citizen. Then the business case is equally important. Global companies in particular need to decide where to invest, where to expand. And we look to expand in places where there is social stability, an environment, a community in which commerce, in which communities can grow and flourish. And to do that, I've observed 3 preconditions. There has to be a good rule of law, so contracts have to be enforced. We need to protect our intellectual property. We need access to justice for all the reasons that we've talked about. It's important that people feel that the justice system is something that they can trust and that they will get a fair shake, and an independent judiciary so that we can get a neutral way of resolving disputes. So that's the backdrop to how to build the program is through the company's broader values and mission. Operationally, the third leg of the stool has two pieces. One is leadership. The general counsel has to be vocal and talk about why it's important, encourage and support it, write the memos that answer people's questions about, what if I don't have insurance, or, am I allowed to do this? And secondly, set a good example so that people say, if Ivan can do it, you can do it. And that's, I take that to heart, right? I don't, that's not the reason why I do pro bono, but it is important that I don't just talk the talk, I have to walk the walk as well. And then the last part of your question about how do you sustain it? You sustain things by building mechanisms. It's very tactical, but it's so important to have a pro bono committee where you have strong leaders. It's important to show up at those committee meetings to continue to push the program forward. Metrics are very important. I've challenged our Medtronic team to increase the number of lawyers and paraprofessionals who participate in pro bono, or increase the number of hours. You have to reward and recognize the good work that's being done. It's important to do partnerships. I so appreciate the work when I was at 3M that we did with Smurls that went back many general counsel before me, many years, and thereby made it part of the tradition, part of the way you operate as a legal department. It's just expected. This is just something we do because it's so important to give back to our communities. I'll close with a final point. Your question about how do you ensure that it continues beyond your tenure, and I rationalized to myself, you can build great operating mechanisms, and it is true though, after you leave, it could fall apart. And it reminds me of a quote that is attributed to something that's on the wall of Mother Teresa's. I don't know if she has an office, but she has a room. And I'm paraphrasing. The title of the poem is called Anyway, and I really encourage you to look it up. It's a great poem, but there's a phrase that says something like, if someone comes after you and destroys what you have built, build it anyway. Build it anyway. Just do it, and then once you leave, it is out of your hands, but it will have been worth doing.
Thank you for that answer. You are a shining example. As the previous panelists have done, I'm going to close out with a call to action. I would like each of you to tell us one thing we can do tomorrow to be better advocates for access to justice and civil legal aid. I'll start with you, Jim.
I'm not sure I can help you with that because you're all doing great work already, but what I'm going to do personally tomorrow is better understand what the organizations I'm involved with are doing in this space and how I can help have them do more.
Thank you.
So, like New Year's resolutions, I think it's important to have modest ambitions. So when I say, in answer to these questions, what can you do tomorrow, or what can in-house lawyers do tomorrow, it's really a very modest suggestion, which is to educate yourself. Read the LSC reports, raise awareness of this issue, remind others. I love, John Levy, your exhortation earlier this afternoon, in which you said, this crisis is happening on our watch, and we can solve it in our time. So if you just say that to a couple of people tomorrow, I think that will go a long way. Vote, give money, support organizations that are here doing the hard work day in and day out, and thank them for the work they are doing.
Thank you. Last word, Jim.
Yeah, that was such a terrific list. The first thing I would say, I had the occasion to go onto the LSC website to in preparation for this panel. It turns out there's a little button at the top that says donate. So I would encourage everybody to go click on that button and support the LSC. Also, I would say just support the organizations out there doing the incredible good work all day, every day on the front lines, the amazing civil legal aid organizations. Support them with your time, with your treasure, contribute pro bono work, just in the way Ivan was describing. Consider joining a board if that's appropriate for you. Lots of these organizations have need for people just to be involved, just to be engaged. Call and write your elected officials. Just with the one example, we know that that can have a great impact. And then the last thing I would say is members of this thing we call the legal profession, take your professional obligation seriously. We are the stewards of the system, and we're the ones ultimately responsible for making it better and to aspiring to that ideal of equal justice.
Thank you so much, all of you, for all that you do and for being here today with us. Thank you.